Welcome. Today I am going to take up a very interesting topic, the FEMA, that is borrowing and lending in Indian rupee. Normally we have seen in the last program, we have seen borrowing and lending in foreign currency. Today we are going to see borrowing and lending in Indian rupee. Before going to the presentation, I want to say one thing. Please go and read FEMA 1999 for the detailed information. Here, whatever expressed in this program is my views. Please refer FEMA 1999 before taking or before relying on any points with reference to this today's presentation. Here, borrowing and lending in Indian rupee, it has to be taken in between the person resident in India and person non-resident India and overseas citizen of India. So this is what you have to see. Here, the person of Indian origin is hereby called as OCI, that is overseas citizen of India, because they have changed the person of Indian origin as overseas citizen of India. So this is the main transaction, that is the borrowing and lending between resident and non-resident, or OCI. So what are the rules and regulations that FEMA contains and what the RBI says, what are the RBI directives they are given? We are going to see only the highlights. For detailed information, please refer FEMA 1999. Credit card usage is not a borrowing or lending. This is what even in foreign currency also, credit card usage is not a borrowing or lending. That is use of credit card in India by person resident outside India. Suppose if he is coming to India and if he is using his credit card, that means that whether he is borrowing the money, no, it is not clearly, it is clearly stated that it is not a borrowing money. And use of credit card outside India by person resident in India, because a person outside India is coming to India and he is using the credit card, then it is not a loan. Then if the person is a person resident in India, he goes outside India and uses his credit card outside, then it is not to be treated as borrowing and lending as per the RBI norms. So the transaction is carried out either in Indian rupee or in foreign currency. In this type of credit cards, it has clearly mentioned that the credit card loans, credit card usage is not a borrowing or lending. This point you have to bear in mind. This is a normal doubt everyone has got. And now I'm going to start with borrow in Indian rupee by person resident in India from NRI and OCI. That is, you are there as a person resident. You are borrowing money from NRI and OCI. What are the rules that you have to follow? So here, borrowing by persons other than the companies in Indian rupee, in INR in India, and borrowing by companies in India. So they have classified the thing into two parts. One is other than the companies and other than the companies and companies. So that is, they have to borrow the money in Indian rupee. Now, I'm going to take up the borrowing by persons other than companies in INR in India by person resident in India from NRI and OCI. So NRI and OCI, they are giving loans to person resident in India in Indian rupee other than the companies. What are the rules that we have to follow? What are the terms and conditions that we have to see? Borrow only on non-repatriation basis. This is a basic thing because the loan is being borrowed in the form of INR, Indian rupee. So Indian rupee, it is not to be allowed to go outside India. So the borrowal can be done by the person resident in India from non-resident India in only on the basis of non-repatriation basis, and the amount received by inmate remittances. So the amount has to come into India in whatever manner. They say that the amount can come into India, that is inward remittances from outside India by debit to NRE, NRO and FCNRB, NRO account of the account holder. So because all the amounts, all the process would have come in the earlier thing to the NRE, NRO and FCNRB account holder. Yes, it is also allowed from the account maintained by the authorized dealer or by or an authorized bank in India. Simple logic, money has to come into India from abroad. Yes, it can be, you can avail in Indian rupee, as well as you can debit NRE, NRO and FCNRB account. Thereby you can give the loan. And the loan period should not exceed 3 years. That is the main thing is a person, if he borrows a money from the person resident in India, from person resident in India, if he borrows money from NRI, the maturity period should not exceed, that is loan period should not exceed the 3 years. Now, borrowing, same thing, point number 4, the rate of interest. What is the rate of interest that the NRI, they have to charge? The rate of interest shall not be more than 2% of the banking bank rate prevailing on the date of availment of the loan. So, what is the bank rate? More than plus 2% you can add. It should not exceed 2%. So, maturity period should not exceed 3 years. The rate of interest should be should not exceed 2% plus BR. Then you have to, the person has to repay the loan, has to remit the interest, has to remit the loan repayment. It has to be paid only to the NRO account of the holder, because from NRO account you cannot transfer, because all the transfer from NRO account abroad are subject to RBI norms. So the FEMA has clearly mentioned that the interest and loan repayment made by the person resident in India to our NRI or OCI, it has to be given credit to the account of NRO of the borrower, NRO of the customer. Now, we are going to see the companies, that is resident companies, they are borrowing loan in Indian rupee from NRA and OCI. In the last slide, we have seen the person other than the companies who is a resident in India, he has borrowed from NRA and OCI. Now we are going to see the companies which borrow the money in INR, in Indian rupee, that is in India, by person resident in India. That is a resident company borrows money from NRI and OCI when subject to the following terms and conditions. So the company should not carry on the agriculture plantation or real estate business or trade and transferable development rights or act as Nidhi or chit fund company. This is the prohibition. That is a company which borrows a money from NRI and OCI, that their company should not carry on the agricultural plantation, etc. And he can borrow, the company can borrow only in the form of NCD, that is non-convertible debentures. Other than that, it is not allowed. So NCD, you can get the money, and in NCD, non-convertible debentures have to be issued to the public by the company. Thereby, they are raising the money, and the rate of interest is not more than the prime lending rate of State Bank of India on the date of passing the resolution at the general meeting plus 3%. So that means PLR plus 3%. To that extent, rate of interest can be charged by the NRI and OCI on the Indian income, on the borrowing company in India. The loan period should not be less than 3 years. In the previous case, that is other than the company, if you borrow, the loan period should not exceed 3 years. Here, the loan period is not less than 3 years. That is 3 years or more, only you are eligible, the company can eligible to get the loan from NRA and OCI, and borrowing on repatriation basis is allowed in NCD, because the borrowing is not allowed. That is borrowing in repatriation basis. Suppose if the company wants to buy on the repatriation basis, yes, it is allowed in the NCD, in the form of NCD. So it should not exceed the ceiling prescribed for equity shares or convertible debentures for FDI. The amount, how the money has to come into India, because they want to convert that money into NCD. The amount has to come in the form of by way of inward remittances outside India, from outside India, by debit of NRE, NRO, or FCNRB account, the account maintained by the authorized dealer or authorized bank in India. So whatever be the borrower, the money has to come. Point number 8 is constant, not for all cases. Now, borrowing, that is in the 9th point, is borrow on non-repatriation basis. First thing, borrow on repatriation basis is also allowed. Here, borrow on non-repatriation basis from NRA and OCI. Yes, it is allowed. Amount received by way of inward, again, amount received from into India by way of inward remittances from outside India or by debit to NRE, NRO, and FCNRB account holder from the account maintained by authorized dealer or by an authorized bank in India. And now the company has to repay the amount. Yes, you can repay the installment, you can repay the interest only to the NRO account of the holder and not to NRE account. So you have to repay, because from NRO account, if you want to transfer, if you want to repatriate, everything is subject to RBI norms. That is, we can say that liberalized remittance scheme is taking control of that. This is one thing. And usage restriction. Now, the company has borrowed the funds. What purpose you have to use the funds? Loan funds has to be used. Loan funds have to be utilized only for the business purpose of the borrower. Next thing, for farmhouse construction is not allowed. So you can use it for the business purpose, but farmhouse construction is not allowed. And the use the same for purpose of, but you can use the fund, borrowed fund, for the purpose of development of construction of residential or commercial premises, roads or bridges. And it should not be used for any type of investment. Or for online lending, in any manner. So that means you should not you borrow another loan, it is not allowed. So not to be used for any investment or on lending in any manner. Now, online lending in infrastructure is been given sanction by the RBI. That is, RBI gives permission to invest in infrastructure by way of on lending. And RBI permission to complete the process or to till the end use is being made. The RBI gives permission to the company to make a deposit, because if because you have to pay interest. So if you say that if deposit is not allowed, then the company has to pay huge interest. So RBI gives permission, because sometimes the project will be delayed. For that, the RBI gives permission to keep the amount in deposit. Now, RBI has to get the information from the company with reference to investment. That is, the company not later than 30 days from the date of remittances for investment in NCD file details with the nearest to RBI office. So it is the duty of the company to file the investment, that is, file the investment details in NCD to the RBI office. And what are the details to be submitted? That is, list containing name and address of the NRIs remitted on repatriation or non-repatriation basis, because both the things are allowed in NCD. So what is the date of receipt of the remittance? What is the amount that you have received? That you have to do it in the INR value. Authorized dealer through whom the remittances received, because normally authorized dealers or banks through whom the money has been received, that also has to be given in the list that is to be submitted to RBI. Now, previous thing is investment. Now, you are giving issue. You are giving you the same thing. Submit within 30 days of issue of NCD, furnish the following details: name and address of the NRI, and what is the total number of NCDs issued, whether on repatriation basis or non-repatriation basis. The company secretary's compliance with the reference to NCD should be adhered. It's a very, very important thing, because here the role of the company secretary is very much important. Now, next stage is lending by authorized dealer, lending by others. Now we are going to see the lending by authorized dealer to NRI in Indian rupee. So authorized dealer is always in India, is a person resident in India, that is authorized dealer, bank or financial companies as approved by the RBI. They can lend the money to NRI in Indian rupee. What are the rules and regulations that the authorized dealer has to follow? That we will see. Authorized dealer can lend to NRI in Indian rupee against the security of shares and other securities, against the immovable property other than the agricultural land, plantation, and farmhouse. That means it is a clear indication that agricultural land, plantation land, and farmhouse have not been considered as a collateral security, a loan from authorized dealer by NRI. Now, lending is subject to, that is, authorized dealer can lend the money to NRI, which is subject to, that is, he has to lend the money in INR, that is the loan process should not be used for the agricultural purposes, trade in TDS, or act as nidhi or chukka. So this is a banned activity. That is, the borrowed amount should not be used for the purpose of. Next one, it should not be used for activity which are not allowed for foreign investments, and not to be remitted outside India or give credit to NRE and FCNRB account of the borrower. It's very, very simple. If you give credit to NRE and the FCNRB, there is no problem. The money can be transferred on repatriation basis. So they say that the lending amount should be dealt only within India. It should not be used and should not be carried to outside India. So this is the main concept. Now, lending by ADA to INR authorized dealer to NRI, that is, derivatives of RBI on such loans and directives on advances against shares and debentures shall be complied with. So this is another important thing that he has to follow. Now, everybody who has borrowed the loan, he has to repay. That is, NRI has to repay the loan. That is, say NRI who is residing outside India, he can make the inward remittances from outside India. This is one. Second thing, by way of debit of his NRE, NRO account, FCNRB account of the borrower in India. So by way of debit of NRE, it is also allowed. So by way to in that manner, you can repay the loan. Then sometimes he has got the shares which has been given as security. So by sale of the securities also, the loan account can be closed. And repayment by relatives. Suppose relatives are also permitted. When the repayment can also be paid by the relatives of the borrower, that is NRI. The relatives are defined by Companies Act of 2013, but the amount is only to be transferred. Transfers are not allowed. Next thing is additional requirements of loans. Suppose in case if the NRI wants any additional loans, yes, that is also possible, but this is subject to the authorized dealer's board's policy. It can be given for any purpose. The amount should not be used for investment in capital market, including margin trading and derivatives. So the money lent to NRI should not be invested in India in the capital market. Now you have to repay. So again, once again, any repayment to the loan by NRI to authorized dealer has to come by way of inward remittances from outside India or by debit of NRE, NRO and FCNRB. So this is the way in which a loan account has to be repaid. And now lend by authorized dealer to acquire shares under employee stock option plan. So what are the rules that you have to follow? NRI, authorized dealer is permitted to grant loan to NRI employees in Indian rupee. So the purpose of to acquire the employee stock option plan are subject to the following terms and conditions. One is lending has to be done as per the board policy of the authorized dealer, which is subject to capital market exposure norms of RBI and other prudential norms. If it is not controlled, then automatically the capital market will be disturbed. So this has to be. Next one is the loan amount should not exceed 90% of the purchase price of the shares, 20 lakhs per employee, whichever is less. That is maximum. Suppose if the 90% of the purchase price exceeds 20 lakhs, so it can be restricted only to 20 lakhs. So this is a very important thing that every company should know. Now, rate of interest and margin have to be decided by the authorized dealer subject to RBI directives, because you are giving loan to NRI employees. Here it is NRI employees. Next thing is direct payment only to company and not to be credited to the borrower's non-resident account in India, because you are giving ESOP to the employees of a company. So the payment has to be, because the company has allotted some shares. So the shares have to be repaid, have to be reimbursed by way of loan that he has got from the authorized dealer. And the credit has to be given only to the company and not to the borrower's non-resident account. Because if you give credit to the non-resident account, automatically fund will be transferred. And also the end use is the shares, ESOP shares are here, the payment has to be made by the non-resident, and the account, the bank, the other resident, they are not supposed to give credit to the non-resident account. He has to give credit only to the company's account. And now repayment, as usual, inward remittances has to come from outside India or by way of debit of NRE, NRO, and FCNRB. Now, housing loans to NRI and OCI, because the latest thing is a lot of people from India, they went outside India and they settle, but they want to construct a house or they want to buy a house in India. What are the rules and regulations that one has to follow? Here, the housing loans have been sanctioned by the authorized dealer or housing finance companies. They has to give the approval, because for any housing schemes meant for the NRI, the housing schemes have to be approved by RBI, and which is subject to the following terms and conditions. That is the quantum of loans, margin money, and repayment period. It is just equivalent to the housing loans availed by person resident in India. The only thing is the interest is the different thing. And loan process, as usual, it has to be given credit only to the NRE and FCNRB account of the borrower, and the payment for installment and interest and other charges, that is, it can come from the remittances of outside India or by way of debit of NRE, FCNRB or NRO account, and also because it's a housing loan, so you can get there some rent. So from rental process also loan account can be closed, or sometimes your relatives might have transferred the funds to the loan account. So it is allowed only by way of fund transfer and not by way of cash payment. And rate of interest, the rate of interest has to be decided by the RBI, and because it also varies, because sometimes the RBI wants to give some concession to NRI's housing loans. So every rate of interest, it depends on the RBI's directives. Now, government securities settlement lending, that is lent to person resident outside India. Suppose he wants to have some government securities payment. So to make margin payment, because he wants to buy some government securities outside India, so he needs some money. So the margin money has to be paid by the person resident outside, by the person resident. For that, the authorized dealer can give the loan, and everything is subject to RBI's terms and conditions. Now, Indian body corporate, now coming to lending by Indian body corporate in INR to NRI and OCI employees, overseas citizens India's employees. So now we are seeing the NRI and OCI. Now for the employees also, the company can give the loan subject to the terms and conditions. So it is only the loan is being sanctioned to the employees. So the purpose is, it can be for a personal purpose, personal loan purpose, or to buy a house property, or to buy a property in India. And lending are just like normal terms and conditions as are applicable to the other staff of the staff resident in India. Next is the process of loan should not be used for the prohibited purposes like real estate or on lending. So the term is, yes, they can avail any personal loan, but it should not be used for the prohibited purpose. This is the main concept. Now, fourth point is lender has to give credit to the NRO account and shall ensure that credit to such account has specific indication on the payment instrument. It's very, very simple. NRO account has to be credited because repatriation is not allowed. If at all you want to make a repatriation, it has to be, it has to be under the ceiling limit of LRS, Liberalized Remittance Scheme. And now, as usual, how to repay the loan? Yes, from process outside India or by way of debit of NRE, NRO, and FCNRB account of the borrower, and not from any other source. So regarding personal loans, relatives are not allowed to pay the amount. That is, housing rents should not be given credit. So only thing, it has to be made by way of debit of NRE and NRO. And clearly mentioned, point number 5, that is how to repay the loan. It has to be clearly mentioned in the loan agreement when the Indian body corporate lend the money in Indian rupee to NRE, NRI and OCI employees. Now, NRI, I mean resident individual is giving, that is we have to give loan to the NRI relatives in Indian rupee. What are the rules and regulations that we have to follow? It can be done. The loan can be done only in the form of cross-check or electronic stamps, right? But which are subject to the interest from the loan, interest from loan and minimum interest from which are subject to it's a interest is applicable for the loan, and the minimum maturing of the loan is 1 year. So that means minimum maturing. So more than 1 year also you can give the loan. The loan ceiling should not exceed the LRS limit. That is, in the financial year, one can give under levelized remittance scheme. The ceiling is 2,50,000 US dollars. So the ceiling limit should not exceed that LRS limit. And the loan, as usual, the loan process should not be used for the prohibited purposes like real estate, on lending areas. And the process not to be remitted outside India, because but it has to be given credit to the NRO. Because the very simple logic is the funds have to be utilized within India, and if there is any debit from the NRO account, that means foreign exchange goes out of India. So for that, the FEMA has given clear indication that the process should not be remitted outside India, that is loan process. Then now repayment, as usual, the funds can come by way of debit of by way of inward remittances from outside India, or by debit of NRE, NRO, and FCNRB account of the borrower, and not from any other source. Process or sale of shares or securities or immovable property against which loan is given. So sale of shares and securities allowed. Then NRE, debit of NRE, NRO account, FCNRB account also allowed. Then money can come from outside India. Now, at the time of lending, the borrower is a resident person. Sometimes the borrower or lender can have some change of the status for various reasons. Let us see first thing, that is change of the status of the borrower to a person resident outside India. So change of the status of the borrower, that is a person resident in India, his status is changed. That is, borrower status is changed to person resident outside India. So in that case, loan availed in Indian rupee, yeah, it is allowed. Authorized dealer is allowed to continue the loan till the maturity, because here the borrower, I am the borrower. At the time of borrower, I am the resident, but suddenly my status has changed to person resident outside India. But authorized dealer allows, okay, he allows the loan to be continued till the maturity, till the closure. Again, as usual, the repayment of loan has to come by way of inward remittances from outside India, or by way of debit of NRE, FCNRB, or NRO account of the borrower. Now, the lender, we have seen the borrower. Now we are going to see the lender. Lender status has changed. So that is a resident Indian, person resident Indian has given loan to resident Indian. Suddenly, the person who has given the loan, the status has changed to person resident outside India. Yes, repayment of the loan has to be given credit only to the NRO. And here, the very simple logic I want to see, any repayment has to come from the fund outside India or by way of debit of NRE, NRO, and FCNRB. If the amount, any loan, if it is given, it has to be given only credit to the NRO. Because from NRO account, no debit or no foreign exchange is allowed. So NRO account is nothing but local funds usage. So this is the main concept of lending. Now authorized dealer, he wants to give loan, sometimes for his branches outside India. So it's a temporary OD, because they want, that branch wants to utilize the funds. Yes, it is allowed in Indian rupee only to the extent of 500 lakhs, that is 5 crores rupees. And all the branches put together, it should not, the loan value should not exceed, OD value should not exceed the INR of 500 lakhs. It is not per branch, it is all the branches, corresponding banks, and head office put together. It's a very, just for information, I have given this here. And NRO in INR account maintained by the authorized by its branches, correspondent banks, and head office outside India. This is what I want to say, and everything is subject to RBI terms and conditions. So it's a very simple. The today's presentation, I mainly concentrated the borrowing and lending in Indian rupee by person resident in India or by person resident outside India to resident outside India to resident India. So this is what I want to highlight by today's presentation. Please go through the FEMA 1999. It's a very interesting area. Please concentrate because a lot of people, they will come for consultation. This is a area wherein you have to concentrate in your practice, and I wish you all the best, and thanks for watching today's presentation. Nandri, Vanakkam.